I've been sitting on this one for so long, I forgot I was still sitting on it. Death of a game, Paladins. I got linked this like 2 days after the Paladins announcement had come out, or 3 days after it came out, and it was like a brand new video. Or actually not after the announcement, like 2 or 3 days after this came out, and I was like, I gotta give it some time. I want to let it, sit there for a while. I'll come back to it later. And you know what? Maybe now is actually a good time. Paladins, what announcement? Oh, that's the announcement. Paladins was no longer being supported. Basically, they were stopped development on it. They were gonna keep the servers up for longer, but like everything else was done. I played Paladins a while back. It's actually, I think, probably one of my most popular videos. Here it is. I'm quitting Overwatch 2 for Paladins. It was an April Fool's video upload, and it kind of went crazy. People loved it. It was fun. And a lot of people still hold the belief that Paladins could have been the next Overwatch, or it could have been either one, but like there was like a few small things they missed on timings. This could have been the alternate timeline or alternate pipeline. So let's give a watch and pay some respect to Paladins. Hello? No, Jerome, been about 4 months.
What if I told you there was supposed to be an Overwatch clone that actually managed to have a modicum level of success, despite being helmed by arguably one of the worst game developers, rated both by the community and, as of late, its own employees? You would probably not know what game I'm talking about, when most of the titles that competed with Overwatch, willingly or not, have failed, except the more recent super popular Marvel Rivals, which has a cast of most of the popular superheroes in it, but shares similar gameplay and modes to Overwatch. But before Marvel Rivals, and yes, actually before Overwatch, there was Hi-Rez the studio, and their history of working on games before quickly moving on to other ones, a little too quickly I might add for my taste. Hi-Rez was cooking
Didn't they do that with like Smite and Smite 2?
When they ended up creating something that was similar in ways to Overwatch, but originally quite unique and novel of a game.
I'm not super familiar on the Smite lore.
While Paladins would have its earliest development started much before its announcement in the 2010s, it wouldn't actually launch into open beta until September of 2016, and then launch fully in May of 2018. Paladins was able to reach 35 million players within just a few years, with peak players at a respectable 20,000 plus. This is not only impressive for the time, but it's impressive in modern
Oh my god, I forgot, dude. I forgot about
these numbers being half of what Overwatch 2 is capable.
You know what, chat, someone help me out here. Who I played like the character where like you can have fire or ice, like you like switch between the two modes. You know what I'm talking about?
Love in current day. While some might scratch their head at that statement, Paladins has always been an underdog in their competition with other competitive shooters, both having a smaller budget / team and being led by a not so liked studio. Paladins would manage to have a 5+ year.
Hi-Rez will be giving minor updates to Smite and Paladins now, laying off 70 employees, but don't worry, Smite 2 is the primary focus of newly streamlined operations. Oh, I remember this.
The run before being recently announced in 2025 to be pushed into a maintenance mode after having most of their employees laid off or moved to other projects. Yep. This would effectively slowly kill the game as active development is halted altogether. The Death of a Game series is usually about highlighting major failures or deaths of companies or games, but sometimes we also chronicle middling titles or even extremely successful and genre-defining ones. That's because our ultimate—
I'm guessing, do they have a whole series on this? Oh, they really do have a whole series. Holy shit. That's kind of cool.
Goal is to cover all virtual worlds and all online gaming in general, whether they are the most popular major hits or the quiet cult classics.
The hook,
if there's
the
a story to be told, we want to tell the
legally
story.
Distinct and
Paladins
legally different.
falls into the latter. Sure, it's in maintenance mode now qualifying for the series, but it still managed to actually reach a good level of success, given the circumstances and their competition. That being said, Paladins never really reached their full potential, at least in my opinion, with many game-breaking and changing updates
There's
happening.
There's one on Overwatch 2? Wait, they made a Death of a Game on Overwatch 2?
In the game's beta phase
crazy.
Before it ever even launched. On top of this, Paladins has had to battle against other issues uphill that kept it from being even more competitive with Overwatch and the like. Pay attention as the video unfolds, as clues will pop up here and there as the timeline progresses until its termination. Once that happens, we will have a final deduction where we combine all of the clues and bits of evidence and crack the case. Without further ado, detectives, we have a case to carry on with, so choose and customize your champion and their cards, and let's complete the objectives. The story begins with the rumblings of a new project for Hi-Rez, following the inability to turn a profit on their more recent online sci-fi shooter of the time, Global Agenda. Hi-Rez, being
never
privately
heard of that in my
funded,
life.
needed to switch gears. While some of their team would move on to Tribes of Sin before abandoning that at the first sight of
Wait, this game looks cool.
trouble too, like they did with Global Agenda. Not like I'm holding a grudge. Hi-Rez! The remaining teams would work on Project Aurum, which was a fantasy-styled action shooter of sorts, and you can actually see some early footage of it here. Project Aurum would spawn Smite, and what would remain of the team would go on to form the basis of Paladins for Hi-Rez. The team tried a sci-fi approach originally to give some love to their Global Agenda roots, but would settle on a more fantasy theme
looks like
ultimately.
1980s.
Overwatch. Yeah, it took me all of like one section and the main body of this video for me to mention it again. It's going to be a boogeyman, but I promise I'm only going to keep comparisons to the beginning of the video as they have very similar timelines pre-launch and at launch. Paladins is historically seen and called an
Chat, let's take guesses. Do you think they're gonna refer to Overwatch as like an alive service or a dead service game? Remember this came out in like January, February, so probably before Spotlight. Actually, it was after Spotlight, but I don't think it had made a big
clone.
impact
But
yet.
according to leadership, Project Aurum was started back in 2012, and thus development for Paladins and Overwatch was actually rather similar. Well, if you just count Overwatch itself, which doesn't make sense because when Hi-Rez Todd Harris talks about it, the co-founder and main director of the game, he states that Paladins came first because of Project Aurum. You can just merely reply or state that, but Overwatch started with Project Titan, which was like pre-2010. Anyway, the comments will be filled with this kind of like comment, but let's get it out of the way. Overwatch is an older game in idea, but Paladins gets unfairly maligned regarding being an Overwatch clone. In development at least. That's because at some point there was a patch and update that kind of made that worse. Overwatch would be officially announced publicly November 2014, and Activision Blizzard would spend the next year building up the hype for the game through the release of character trailers and lore packages. This would cast a shadow over the industry.
Building up hype with lore packages and character reveals, don't you say?
With grand expectations now well expected. Anime level ones. I mean, these shorts were amazing. Paladins would be announced the following year, August 2015, and wouldn't have the same level of hype and marketing, and that could be seen and felt from the start. At this point, while many might assume, including those more savvy with business, that Hi-Rez should just assume the business corporate decision of being the second or the third best, which still pays extremely well. But Paladins was actually still on its own path largely at this point, and was working towards its own unique identity. Overwatch would be the first to reach a publicly playable state in the form of a limited closed beta test in October of 2015, and Paladins would shortly follow, releasing in November of 2015 in closed beta as well. This time, Hi-Rez had managed to keep things as close
I forget what it was called. It was called like Spectator Watch or Watch
as possible, and the runoff would surely
there was
help
a running meme because
especially
nobody
with
can get
the
into
differences
Overwatch beta.
between the games potentially. I was lucky enough to test both of these games in their closed beta, and they really did feel like distinguished and different games. Yes, Overwatch was a hero shooter with objective-based modes, and Paladins was that too, but it wasn't just that. It actually had a massive open map instead of like a smaller shooter-centric map that allowed for all kinds of plays and discovery. And even though it was a big map, the matches would still only last around 15 minutes to like 30, and you could ride around during the spawn or outside of combat in general with the help of a mount. As you would progress in levels, you would be given new choices and selections of cards that would empower you in your abilities, allowing for more deep customization and replayability. The card system in Paladins is actually one of the most unique aspects of the game, allowing you to choose from a group of them pre-match called a loadout, and then during the match, which is kind of like leveling up and picking talents, as well as purchase from a selection of generic ones, sort of like items in a MOBA. The process, or flow of a match, was built around the objective focus of the game mode Siege, and how players in it must rush to capture a point, then defend it as the map progresses. You then had to push your payload essentially, kind of like push in Overwatch, more so than just the payload map, where both teams could push to the other side, progressing the game. Time to kill in Paladins is another one of the unique aspects of the game, not just due to how the card system functioned, but also due to simply how much slower it was to kill a player, versus in something like Overwatch or Battleborn even. This allowed less shooter-centric players to have more of a chance, and even MMO players finding a bit of a home with Paladins. Meanwhile, a failed hero shooter in Lawbreakers tried the opposite.
Maybe a bit of controversial, but I feel like if the kill time is too long, people get turned off to it eventually. Like if they just never die, like, and people just it takes forever. Like,
including not being free to play. I know that
kinda
seems
get
like a
sick of it.
stray, but I felt like it was relevant. Regarding Paladins being free to play, Hi-Rez would state that they had learned their lesson from Smite, which recently was making some moves and money largely through their skin sales, aka microtransactions, since the game was actually free. And thus Paladins was shifting to a similar model, also cleverly positioning it as a free alternative to Overwatch. Overwatch would launch in May of
Which was
2016
smart.
and would change the very face of gaming, especially the shooter world. While this sounds like an exaggeration, not only would Overwatch reach 7 million players in the first week, Blizzard would also report over $1 billion in revenue the first year. Overwatch was a near full-priced multiplayer game with no single player, and thus the player number that you hear is paid players. Overwatch would make even existing franchises start adopting characters and heroes and ultimate abilities and the like, much like MOBAs made other games do before,
A lot of people forget about all this
including
kind of
hero
stuff.
shooters. But although the Paladins, the Overwatch clone comments get old, what people, including the co-founder of Hi-Rez, Todd, failed to grasp is that Paladins might not have been made with the idea to copy Overwatch, but it was a unique game. But a major change would happen in closed beta following the incredible success of Overwatch, I might add, August of 2016, with their CB30 patch, which would essentially turn Paladins into Overwatch. This is impossible not to notice, whether from afar or even as a player. Not only would things like the UI and the entire mounting system, which was now automated, and the card system even be changed, things that people didn't even want.
I'm gonna read parts of that. Paladins is my go-to multiplayer game for weeks now. I loved it more than Overwatch, Smite, Rainbow Six Siege, everything. I fucking loved it. Mounts, large maps, intense fights, everything about it. I hadn't liked an FPS this much since Halo 3. It was literally my favorite multiplayer game of all time. Recently gotten friends and gave it a second chance. They tried it way back before reloading was even a mechanic, and were amazed at how much better it had gotten / how much they were enjoying it. Paladins was starting to find its own identity as a hero shooter. I was really excited to see where it would go. CB30 destroyed everything I loved about the game. It turned into a cheap, less polished version of Overwatch. TTK is too fast. There aren't fights in games anymore. I don't have intense battles going back and forth where I have time to aim all my shit perfectly, because consistently being able to think and hit them isn't as important. It's just kills. You just get kills and you get deaths. Someone sees you first, tough shit, you die. Back in CB29, if I shot someone, my first instinct was to run or to fight back because it was an option. Now if someone gets the drop on you, you essentially have two options, run or die. It's awful. It took the one thing that made about the game fun and unique from different hero shooters and broke it. And that's the biggest issue. Paladins has lost its identity. There's no reason for me to go or for me to launch Paladins instead of Overwatch anymore, because it's legitimately just inferior, less polished version. Bring back mounts, completely revert the TTK changes. Wow, okay. That's actually kind of nuts.
And the card system even be changed?
Holy
Things
shit.
that people didn't even want changed, really? They also would change core features, like the time to kill, which was also much faster. You
Did
also
they end up
now
putting it
had
back?
ultimate abilities, a UI that mimicked Overwatch, and it was like instead of differentiating from it, when they already had success doing that, Hi-Rez ran towards the comparisons. So you can't really be
Because I kind of remember when I played it, it wasn't crazy
when they arrived,
time.
no? Paladins would enter its open beta, but more like its early access launch, as typical with high-res games, so they can monetize it as fast as possible due to self-publishing. The new changes were now present, and regardless of these changes, Paladins would explode into top Steam charts, reaching 100,000 new accounts created in just one day as well. While Paladins would lack the polish that Blizzard games were kind of famous for, it was still quite polished as a title, with no FPS dropping and good visuals. While some were flocking to the game because of its ability to borrow from other successful games, the majority of the reviews that you would read on Steam during this period of time.
Chad, there's a bug on my wall. I need to annihilate it. Give me 2 seconds. Target acquired. Executed. Doesn't pay rent. Doesn't get to stay. Doesn't pay rent. Doesn't get to stay. Sorry, let's continue.
Showcased that Paladin's biggest strength was being the free alternative to Overwatch, not necessarily being the copy to it though. And it was free to play, which should be stated that, as I tend to always say in videos.
I know a lot of people don't like that Overwatch went free to play. Like, people, that's one of the things they always tout is like, oh, I miss the old version where we got everything for, like, realistically, free to play is one of the things that probably saved Overwatch long term. Like, in short term, it was ass, but long term, there's a reason why it's getting as much as it does now. There's a reason why it gets listened to. There's a reason why it gets the resources it does. There's a reason why even after the Microsoft acquisition, they didn't just write it off. Franchise is valuable. It makes money. because it makes money, it will get content, it will get updates. If the game doesn't make money, it doesn't do whatever, they're not going to give it any updates, it's not going to get whatever. Thing is, it was terrible on launch, like the battle pass. No, you're not wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong on that aspect. Like, there were definitely things that they fucked up. I'm just speaking objectively, free to play versus paid, right? They definitely did some things wrong, though, for sure.
It was like this, that free to play is an oxymoron. It's free to try more like, but there's always a couple of things that you have to.
And I mean, a lot of people had conversations with people from the Overwatch team at that time, myself included, and they were basically told, like, hey, we have to monetize the game. Like, we're not sure if skins is going to be enough, because what I'm speaking to is the battle pass, like, hero thing. And people were like, dude, that's a big part of the game. And that was when they came out and publicly said, like, we have all this data that nobody actually counter swaps, and it's not a big deal. People always play like the same 2 or 3 characters. That ended up being not true at all for when Overwatch 2 came out at all. But they did eventually walk it back, you know?
To buy, and things that end up making it either pay to win or a bunch of vanity and collection stuff that kind of are just cool to have. Now, Paladins wouldn't have any pay-to-win aspects in it, luckily, but still it rubbed many the wrong way, including myself, that they were already charging people for things in a supposed open beta. While Overwatch would hit multiple millions of players in the first week, Paladins, a game built by barely a team of originally like a dozen or so developers, would take a few months but would hit similar numbers. This was a major success to me, though it should be stated that Overwatch's players were paying $40 for the game, while Paladins wasn't able to make that level of money without their microtransactions, which Overwatch would also have. Still, it's safe to say that Paladins at this point was the de facto number 2 dog, at 60,000 peak players on Steam, which was a nice place to be when many titles were coming out and floundering spectacularly.
Chat, remember 60,000 was a big accomplishment on Steam, and now it's like used as a big number when people argue if a game is actually a success or not, and they're like, that's shit, that's not enough players, it's not good, not enough.
Paladins would also launch on consoles into early access into the following year, further boosting its population and reach. Paladins would even manage, though a few years later, crossplay, something that Overwatch would actually take a little bit longer to achieve. By the end of 2017, Paladins had reached a total of 5 million players and still had an active player count on Steam. However, the most controversial patch yet would happen December 18th, 2017. And yeah, arguably more controversial than the Overwatchification update. OB64 would, not unlike the Overwatch update, change the foundation of Paladins, this time regarding the monetization. Now cards would only be able to be leveled up by opening chests, and you had to get the same card multiple times in order to level it up. Now cards also couldn't be chosen for a loadout pregame, and you could level up the cards to as much as like level 10. So holding 5 cards against a player who didn't level them up would put you at like a 50 level advantage over somebody. This is even worse because now the game is kind of pay to win. Because your character is more powerful with more powerful traits. Now, I don't know if these changes came because Hi-Rez was looking for a way to make more.
The cards do. I never played Paladins. Well, they just explained it a little bit. It basically gives you more level, gives you more power. Think about it, I guess the best way I can think about it off the top of my head is like, think about if you played Stadium right now, and it's like, you started off the game with like higher abilities than the other team, and like it's scaled up, you know, where it's like, they started off with 20% weapon power, and you start off with 5%
more money,
weapon power,
or
and then
felt that they
scales up through the entire game.
Keep being second best if they weren't going to get paid accordingly, if you catch my drift. Luckily, the update, though, would only last a few patches before being removed, but the damage was kind of already done, with the peak population dropping to like 34,000 players around this point. And worse, the reputation of Paladins and Hi-Rez, further I should add, being tarnished. This would keep players from playing Paladins because they weren't sure that they even reverted these changes in the first place, as some of my sources would even state. Coming as a bit of an all.
One of the hardest things for a game company to do is pull itself out of a bad decision or a fucked up decision. With Overwatch has been on the right track for arguably a year and a half. I'd say 2023 is when they kind of like realized they need to turn it around. And then it was a very slow crawl since then, with some small accelerated parts. But there's many games that have a fucked up launch, or they do something stupid or whatever, and it's like they genuinely do fix the game later, but people just will not go back and try it again. Or they don't even know it exists, or if the changes exist, because they don't care. They move on to the next thing.
Ball move detectives in attempting to cash in on the current trend of battle royale games, as typical with Hi-Rez and, no, not just the Paladins accusations, check out this. Paladins would launch a spin-off mode dubbed Paladins Battlegrounds. Paladins Battlegrounds would feature hero shooter battle royale gameplay with up to 100 players on a giant map.
Is this what I think it is?
And to put it simply, and not spend too much time explaining what Paladins Battlegrounds was, or what it would later become known as, Realm Royale, because we've actually already covered it on the series, Realm Royale was a battle royale hero shooter that was fantasy focused.
This game was so fucking peak for like a week.
Realm Royale would launch later in the year, in the summer, and would feature a different style and gameplay compared to the mode featured in Paladins. Now this shift wasn't just a change of a name, it literally became a Fortnite clone overnight.
And then it died, and then it got resurrected and came back and was huge again for like 3 days.
I mean, you can even see it in
I've actually never seen a game speedrun of birth and death
video game
faster than Realm
Royale.
Royale.
While it might seem like I'm just picking at hairs here, I think Hi-Rez was already showing a desire to pivot to something else, bigger and better. A habit that they would showcase throughout nearly all of their titles, especially the more recent ones. Hi-Rez chasing trends as a company wasn't inherently bad, it's kind of smart. It just seemed like they would get bored of their new toy eventually though, and move on to the next shiny one. And Realm Royale was just another example of this, especially when it was recently officially cancelled after existing in a maintenance mode for some time quietly, with no communication concerning such. The full launch of Paladins would happen May 8th, 2018, roughly 2 years after it entered its supposed open beta.
Oh, the other one was the open
early
beta.
access launch.
You're right.
This time, all of the review
I thought they said that they actually did end up launching someone
show was
like
technically
after,
more positive. Far fewer players would join the game during this time compared to their open beta launch. My guess is that people already thought that the game was out. So
yeah, let me see again.
Although the review ratio was technically more positive.
So it came out, is it right here? No. Back here? What was the date?
After existing in a maintenance mode for some time quietly, with no communication concerning such. The full launch of
May 8th, 2018.
Paladins would happen May 8th, 2018.
Wasn't Overwatch's launch date like May 5th or May 7th or something?
Roughly 2 years after it entered its supposed open beta, closer to an early access launch.
Date to pick.
This time, although the review ratio was technically more positive.
So January 2018, so it was probably like right about here. This jump right here. Damn, that's like not a whole lot.
Far fewer players would join the game during this time compared to their open beta launch. My guess is that people already thought that the game was out, so launching it.
Although looking at it, it should be this one, right? Why is this such a big jump? What happens here?
Would join the game during this time.
Is that when Overwatch stopped doing updates?
My guess is that people already thought that the game was out.
Is that what it is? COVID. I guess COVID
it didn't really do much to push things. Another issue could be the combination of now having a lack of identity, being the Overwatch clone, and proper marketing. Had Paladins been more unique like it was pre-launch, they could have marketed themselves on that fact and thus differentiated without having to put that much money into it. Instead, now you have an Overwatch clone in many respects without any of the marketing that that game is famous for and capable of. Just watch the launch trailers and compare them. One feels like a movie, the other feels like a Fiverr cinematic. Paladins would drop a mobile game sometime during the same month. Very fitting, which would be eventually canned after next to no hoopla for it. Reportedly, Paladins Strike, as it was dubbed, was made by Goblin Network, a company who no longer exists, a Chinese company that Hi-Rez seemed to just kind of offload their development to, contracting-wise, and the results were just about as expected. Diablo Immortal, except way worse. With population data at under 30,000 peak players and under 15,000 concurrent for the first time, Paladins was already showing signs of slowing down the same year that it launched. Sure, the game was able to hit 35 million players in total, reportedly, but things weren't peachy keen at Hi-Rez, their parent company. Hi-Rez would split into 3 studios following major news dropping in August of 2018. This was done in a way to focus development on specific projects reportedly, and have studios assigned to specific games most likely. Though I also have to be honest, I think it's a tactic that studios like Wildcard behind Ark Survival use to shed their negative stigmas associated with their name.
Yeah, true.
Evil Mojo Studios was put in charge of running Paladins. Something I found interesting when trying to find out more about the team behind Paladins, aka pre-Evil Mojo and post-Evil Mojo. And to be honest, it's really difficult, detectives. The team is very small, and very likely always has been, likely contributing to why it seemed a bit outmatched, not just budget-wise, but content-wise compared to Overwatch. But worse, to me at least, was that it seemed like those working on Paladins in general, besides a few key figures like the art director and a couple leaders, were rather inexperienced. And I would argue even like a junior level team. Mind you, sometimes credits aren't accurate online, and maybe some of these developers
Wait, why is it so difficult to find who works
disappeared
on
into
it?
the ethos, but I think that it's actually indicative of why Paladins never felt like it had
even
its
like game director stuff?
own full identity, because it never really had its own full team. That just screams we made, or at least changed this game to keep up
That is actually a big problem, though. If a game constantly has its dev team rolling over, or new people coming in and constantly leaving, and also being too small, yeah, this can cause
and
big
also
problems.
showcases a historical inability for Hi-Rez as a company to maintain their talent when they would have them. Hi-Rez wasn't going to be able to compete with Overwatch and other live service shooters with such infrequent updates too. I feel 2019 was the year that this really changed for Paladins. We actually would see a number of named and advertised, partly, updates, starting with the Pirate's Treasure update in September of 2019. The problem is this is like the worst update of the year, because it's a classic live service monetization update, where it's just a battle pass and new skins that you can buy. The Damned Frontier, as it was dubbed, would add a new champion, Rom, whom I'm actually quite fond of because he looks and plays like a Doom character. And Paladins would then introduce...
Was Paladins the game where they said, like, you guys are releasing too many characters, slow down, and, like, didn't want them to release
new
anymore?
siege maps during this time, Shattered Desert and Bazaar. Bazaar's introduction is one of the coolest. It has a really cool soundtrack, and honestly shows probably some of the most personality for a map in the game. Tigran's Tail, which would be the
ROM meta was literally Malga meta?
last update of the year, would drop December 2019 and would release another champion, this time Tiberius, the Weapon Master. 2 more updates would happen at the start of 2020, and these were kind of more of the same live service slop monetization updates. There's a couple of aspects.
Your new video is called Stadium Passionates, but has nothing to do with Passionates. Sorry, let's keep going.
That are strange about this, though. For starters, Paladins isn't published by a big corporation. They're self-published, meaning that Hi-Rez was doing this themselves. As a private company, not a corporation, they were purposely mimicking corporate gaming's approach as a private company. Ew.
Oh, the like bunch of recolors. Oh, not you
Published
too.
by a big corporation. They're self-published, meaning that Hi-Rez was doing this themselves. As a private company, not a corporation, they were purposely mimicking corporate gaming's approach as a private company. Ew. The other aspects I dislike, and this is
The
true
recolors were all free?
for all live service games, is that developers are just sitting on the content. Your
Were they actually free? All of them?
content, your maps, your champions, your new things, you name
Why
it.
would it be a
They're
bad
just
thing?
sitting on all of it with the intention to breadcrumb it to release it.
Wait, if you buy one and then you get a bunch of recolors, that's a bad thing? Oh, maybe because they're just 2 color schemes for Battle Pass. That Battle Pass brought all 5 recolors. Wait, oh, so it's not free. So you got it in the Battle Pass? And then, like, let's say one was at level 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Oh, that's ass.
This isn't the same as designing it and then launching whenever ready. No, it's more calculated and kind of sleazy. It's the calculation, because the calculation is just about making more money. These paltry updates might be historically blamed on COVID, but that happened during the last update of the year. After reaching an impressive 45 million players now, Paladins alongside other multiplayer titles would release fewer updates in 2020 to coordinate with the pandemic and all. However, many other shooters, even classic ones, were growing in population size during this time. Meanwhile, Paladins' player base was shrinking by the end of 2020, down to just 14,000 players peak and under 10,000 players concurrently. Hi-Rez, recognizing how slow the update cycle was going for their past year, would
honestly, like, that's not horrible though. Like 14,000 peak, 10,000 daily.
promise with their
concurrent?
Eternal
That's
Pyre
not
update
bad.
and subsequent ones that the
not
new
great, but it's
update
not
cycle
bad.
would be more frequent. The major update being Season 4 Calamity, which would drop February 3rd, 2021. Not only would it introduce a new hero in the
In 2019, the queue times on Paladins were up to 40 minutes in an open queue game.
form of Yagoroth the Devourer, it would add some new ranked rewards as well. But the promised more frequent changes came, but the updates weren't really anything to write home about. They were not really even filled with much content, to be frank. Each update would add a new champion just about, but not really a whole lot of anything else. And I know we hate Overwatch comparisons, damn it, but Overwatch had more content and a seasonal Christmas patch than Paladins had in like full season launches.
Oh, that's bad, because those Christmas patches were nothing. They were just a bunch of skins and some loot boxes and maybe a spray. Like
I know Paladins
Oh,
was
that's not
supposed to be
good.
the free alternative, but it felt more like the free indie alternative. Imagine if they had bigger budgets, a bigger team, and a proper support system. They would have likely left Overwatch's shadow a bit more and found more success. Population by the end of 2021 was down to just 13,000 peak players and 7,500 concurrent. These were numbers getting dangerously close to a population size that would struggle to find accurately matched games, which would just exacerbate issues. Season 5 would drop January 31st, 2022, and although it would, like the previous 8 updates, just release one champion and a few balance changes, the update, dubbed Schism, just feels so uninspired. They dubbed their battle pass this time around the Abyss.
Wait, that skin was actually kind of fire, though. That was actually kind of a fire skin.
Dubbed Schism just feels so uninspired. They dubbed their
That was fire.
battle pass this time around the Abyss Hunter Academy, which kind of sounds cool. It sounds like something Monster Hunter-esque, or like My Hero Academia. The problem being that that's the extent of the coolness of the update. Where are the proper challenges? Where's the lore and the thought? Why not introduce a new player academy that allows old players to master new challenges, or do something corny with each other? When you're just releasing a new battle pass after new battle pass after new battle pass.
Yeah, it's like nothing to bring you in. There's no lore, there's no character development, but then like, other than just the new hero, right? Like if you don't play the new hero, there's nothing for you. So it's like, well, what the fuck do we do now? You know, those like little mini events, even if they're not great, it's at least
no
something.
new gameplay. It just feels like business updates more than game updates. Hi-Res would restructure.
That's actually such a powerful statement right there. They felt like business updates, not game updates. Damn. I feel like you could put that in a lot. You could say that about a lot of things.
Yet again, this time, more officially, I guess, an Evil Mojo would still handle Paladins, but would also now handle Realm Royale and Rogue Company. The latter two described as being in maintenance mode. Evil Mojo was split extremely thinly at this point, having to run maintenance on 2 different games and live development on another. With the restructuring would also come a number of undisclosed layoffs. Hi-Res wasn't sitting as pretty as they were before, with Smite fading away in relevance and revenue generation, and the resources being spent on developing its sequel. Following the news and subsequent smaller updates, the population would continue to drop.
Didn't like the Smite player base not even want Smite 2? They just wanted Smite 1 to just keep going, and like, isn't Smite 1 like regarded as like the better game? I'm not super familiar with Smite. That's just like what I've read, player sentiment wise.
Summer of 2024, hitting as low as 5,500 players peak and just 3,400 players concurrent.
We just wanted a better engine with all the skins, so like you don't have to rebuy them all.
Thing we avoided mentioning due to how many times we have already mentioned it was Overwatch. It actually released a sequel in 2022, meaning that they were getting newer and fancier content, meanwhile Paladins was heavily stagnating. And yes, Overwatch 2 was mostly hated, but it still was overall more success for Overwatch. The Paladins team would add custom games that would actually become quite popular during this time, allowing players to customize just about everything about the game. However, the updates from the end of 2023 to the end of 2024 were all small.
Smite 2 is missing like 65% of the cast? What? Still?
Updates, some not even adding any new champions or maps at all. And just when you thought that Paladins would get a slow but respectable death, Marvel Rivals would pop out of nowhere and just start knocking everyone out, surprising everyone with their smash launch on December 6th, 2024. Marvel Rivals would reportedly make over 150 million their first month and be downloaded.
Yeah, and their first esports tournament just got announced today, and it's a $3 million tournament.
By 20 million players in just the first few months. This level of success was insane, especially with so many hero shooters still on the market, but Overwatch and Paladins had been slowly fading away. Paladins more so, and Marvel Rivals had just poured gasoline on all of that. During this time, Paladins would drop to a mere 4,600 players peak and 2,100 players concurrent. Smite 2 would launch for Hi-Res at the end of 2024 to quite mixed reviews, due to how the monetization was handled regarding skins not carrying over. Now personally, I think that's not really a good reason to hate a game, though I understand why people would for that reason. It's also like when people try to handwave things and say, oh, it's just the same game but a different engine, except the engine is completely different and improved, and it feels that way. God, I can't believe I'm actually holding water for Hi-Res, but the point being that Smite 2 wasn't bad.
That seems very opposite of what I've read.
But it wasn't a smash hit that Hi-Res seemingly needed it to be, and maybe arguably wasn't the direct upgrade that they needed it to be to Smite 1. And with nearly all the other high-res games severely slowing down at this point, largely due to the neglect for many years, Hi-Rez was going to have to start making some big moves if they wanted to stay afloat as a private company. January 29, 2025, and Hi-Rez would drop more news that they would be planning on shrinking their content cycle even more for Paladins going forward. This was accompanying their update of Wakona's Wake. Worse, and seemingly coming without Evil Mojo Studios planning, the studio working on Paladins and Hi-Rez would drop a bomb on everyone. February 2025. Hi-Rez, seemingly, in a move of desperation, would put all of their eggs into the Smite 2 basket and lay off a whopping estimated 60 developers. Operations would be shifted largely to Smite 2, meaning that the other 3 games, Rogue Company, Realm Royale, and yes, Paladins, would have their development
Is Rogue Company
halted,
still alive?
and they would be shifted fully into
or
maintenance
did it get
mode.
Realm Royale?
The thing being, a number of Smite devs were also let go, meaning that it wasn't just placing all of the eggs into one basket, it was getting rid of any of the excess ones that you felt like you didn't need to try to keep your company afloat.
Is it maintenance mode? Well, Realm Royale was in maintenance mode. That shit's actually dead now. It's Realm Royale, just a bit slower. Okay.
The thing being, a number of Smite 2 devs were also let go.
Okay,
so it's not me excusing layoffs in game development, and I hope that everyone got on their feet and got the help they needed, but I'm simply explaining why Hi-Rez would have to make these harsh decisions. While normally Todd Harris would respond to game-related stuff and Erez Goran, the other Hi-Rez founder, the main one, would respond to like business stuff, Hi-Rez now had a CEO, Stuart Chisholm. Stuart had actually been a part of Hi-Rez for some time, helping both develop Tribes and Smite, but now, as fans were calling it, sort of accurately speaking business-wise, Stuart had become a mouthpiece for Hi-Rez, and a bodyguard for criticism, like typical of a CEO for the founders of the company. Chisholm literally brags about being a leader in games as a service on his LinkedIn, and when receiving negative publicity for the layoffs of the following year, would delete his Twitter account altogether. Both of these things.
Oh my god! Yeah, he deleted his Twitter account when they made the announcement of the layoffs. That was
all you know about the
crazy.
guy. But sadly, Hi-Rez at the executive level has always been filled with these types, and it's a shame. I say it every Hi-Rez video, but Hi-Rez really has a potential as a studio to do so much more.
I mean, it's no secret. It could be the best game on the fucking planet. You have execs that shoot it in the foot and don't know what they're doing and run around in circles and just do whatever the fuck they want and fuck everybody. Your game will suck balls. There's a big elephant in the room on that one.
And they've shown it with a consistent ability to make fun games. However, past making fun games, they never show an ability to properly maintain a game and have such a history of trend chasing to negative and poor results. While for many years, I would always try and observe Hi-Rez and their actions from a video game perspective and video game studio lens. My newest theory is just simpler. Occam's razor. I think the people in charge of the company found gaming as a place in Realm to make money in, and with. I don't think they really have a loyalty to gaming in the same way that other indie or private studios might have. This would explain their desire to over-monetize all of their games and how they show little desire to keep development trucking when the going gets rough. They also have some of the worst PR I've ever seen from a company. I mean, the founders and CEO are all heavily disliked. Just read Reddit or Twitter comment sections for like 5 seconds and poof. I don't think Hi-Rez will ever learn from their lesson, and not at this point, with how stuck these grown men are in their ways. The only thing that we can hope for is the painless transition for those who work with them and were let go in the past few years. Their recent reception to the criticism regarding Smite 2 is another good example of this, or their non-response, as typical of Hi-Rez. The ironic thing is that they have tons of community managers working at the company from previous companies. It's just that one of them is Daybreak. While Paladins is still...
The community management team from Paladins was actually gas. Like, I only interacted with them once or twice, but you know what's funny? We had no announcement, we didn't hype it up, nothing. We just, me, Seagull, and Shade, and I think Jonas actually came the second day. We just said, we're gonna go play Paladins today. And we went and played Paladins on stream, and the Paladins dev team showed up in our chats, and we're like, hey, like, this is the community team for Paladins. Would you like to have all the characters in the game unlocked? And we were like, what? And they were like, yeah, give us your Steam IDs. And so they unlocked every hero in the game for us and gave us like a little bit of spending money to buy some skins. And we were only there for like a day or two, just hanging out. And like, there was like their top post on Reddit. People were like in their Discord, same thing. They're like, holy shit, Seagull Flats are playing Paladins right now. People were trying to stream snipe us like crazy. Like, apparently we bumped into like some like Paladins pro quote unquote team like queued into us to shit stomp us once or twice. That was an experience, but it was fun. The whole thing was just fun. And the fact that they picked up on that, like, we were only there for like 2 hours on like a random Tuesday, you know what I mean?
Though technically trucking, its development has all been halted, and it's at a mere 3,300 players peak, 1,700 players concurrently. The only silver lining is a possible sequel. And well, that's not really a silver lining with how Hi-Rez just handled Smite's sequel. In fact, I might even have given Paladins players jump scares with that statement. Because how is it a silver lining to have your emotions tugged around with the promise of things being different this time? Even if you have some fun with it, it's like being with an abusive partner, where sometimes things are good, so the good is supposed to outweigh the bad. That's what being a Hi-Rez supporter is like, or a gamer for their games. It was like an abusive relationship, where every time a new game would come out and you had fun, you felt like things were gonna be different this time. Well, things were never different, unless changes are made and put into practice. And if the core of something or someone is rotten and not willing to change, it takes a lot more than a few fancy moves to put that away or change that fact. If you buy a Hi-Rez game at this point, you're basically subjecting yourself.
At some point, pro players of Paladins created a tournament themselves to get players back, and devs were giving them in-game currency as rewards. The comp players became dev-worthy at some point.
To this treatment again and again, no matter how many new company names they come up with. This is accompanied by them having interest in just making your money, not forming a relationship with you, and not servicing you properly. The music's playing fair, so detectives, let's get to cracking this mystery for good. The timeline has terminated, and we have gathered more than enough clues to solve this case, and so, if you missed any along the way, why did Paladins get its development halted, and why did it fail to reach the heights of success that it could have? Well, Hi-Rez decision-making, classic.
Yeah.
Monetization pushes. Loss of innovation and uniqueness. Fierce competition. Slow and infrequent update cycles.
I feel like they didn't have the fiercest competition. They had 4 years of Overwatch being kind of in the shitter to probably pull it back together, but I think it's mostly they just wanted to chase the trends. They made the Battle Royale, they'd made the game more like Overwatch, they didn't have anything that set them apart, it seems like.
The Hi-Rez effect. If you've seen any of my other episodes regarding Hi-Rez, Global Agenda, one of my first episodes and my favorite games ever, hence my blood feud with Hi-Rez, and my Rogue Company episode, you know what the Hi-Rez effect is. It's their inability to manage a game and work through the game's balancing and life cycle issues, all the while being consistently able to
I've never played that game, never seen it. That game looks cool.
Even when they're called
almost like
copycat games, like Paladins, which still managed to find success and develop a cult following. While this episode might have come across very negative, my negativity is pointed more so.
To be honest, characters being pushed out faster than Overwatch. Yeah, that's what I was saying. If I remember correctly, they actually asked them to stop making characters and won't just focus on the game.
So at the Shepherd, I actually think that Paladins was relatively successful, given all that it was given from Hi-Rez, and I enjoyed my time beta testing the game personally. I just can't help but think about what could have been. And that sounds strange for a game that became the Overwatch free-to-play clone, but I really think that Paladins could have set itself apart and been something more and something special.
Probably could have.
Hi-Rez had more faith in it and less faith in just copying trends. Regardless, plenty of players found enjoyment in Paladins, whether through characters like Makoa and his ability to eat anything thrown at him as a tank, or Vatu the flanker and his high skill ceiling and powerful ult. Paladins might not have the best historical view in hindsight, but I think it's worth mentioning that it made plenty of players' days better, the free Overwatch clone or not. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you thought about Paladins in the comments below.
Cool video, really cool video. I thought Paladins was really cool. I was so many years later, there wasn't really gonna be a time where I play a ton of it just because it was mostly gone and dead. Not dead, but dying by the time I even knew it was a thing. So it is kind of sad. And realistically, depending on if the timeline was a little different, Overwatch could have been the one in the shitter and Paladins could have been the one on top. But it's funny looking at some Overwatch stuff now, like the stadium stuff, and it's damn, Paladins died and guys took a few ideas from it. Not saying you can't do that. Most games do take from each other, but maybe Paladins did die so Overwatch could get back up and run again. Really good video though. Sad about Paladins though. Feels bad, man. I wanted to go back and play it for April Fools, but I kind of forgot. Not gonna lie, and then it was too late. So